Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Illinois Extension platform where we are welcoming on Devin Braunstein, Assistant Director with the Illinois Office of Broadband for the first of two training sessions, two repeat training sessions for the Illinois BEAD Challenge. We're happy to have you on today, and I'm going to hand it right over to you for an introduction to the training.
Great, thanks, Nancy. So I'm Devin Braunstein, again, work at the Illinois Office of Broadband. I'm sure I know many of you from my previous role with the City of Chicago and from the last few weeks of webinars that we've been doing as a state around the BEAD challenge process. So what this training is today is what we're calling a train the trainer. So the BEAD challenge process, we'll do a little bit of recap, but it can be a little bit complex and inaccessible for those who aren't kind of deep in this topic every day. So the purpose of today's training is to train you, give you the tools you need to help your community members, residents, colleagues, other institutions participate in the BEAD challenge process, which will help us overall get the map right. So this sort of overall goal is we want to make sure that we have the most accurate picture of broadband connectivity across Illinois. So a couple of housekeeping items. First, as you heard, we're offering today's meeting in both English and Spanish. So please navigate to the bottom of your Zoom screen and select the globe that says interpretation, and you'll be able to select English or Spanish, and that is the language that you'll hear today's conversation in. Closed captions are also available, so you can navigate to the button that says closed captions and click that if you would like to see those. And then if you're able to, please change your name in Zoom. So it says your name and your organization, or if you're here just as an individual, your name and then community member. And we're really excited that you're all here. So this will help us get a better sense of who's in the room. So we'll share a couple of reminders throughout the hour about interpretation. And if you are having any trouble, just let us know. To rename yourself, you can right click on your name, and then there should be a button that says rename. But if you can't do it, also no worries at all. All right, so objectives for today. By the end of this webinar, we hope that you will understand how you can improve the broadband map. You'll understand how to use the speed test tool. You'll feel ready and prepared to support community members in your areas to take speed tests and participate in the challenge process, and you'll have the materials that you need to spread the word. So here's our agenda. First, we're going to do a quick icebreaker community building activity, get a sense for who's in the room. Then I'll do a recap on what is the challenge process. Then we'll dive into the training. And this will include how can individuals participate, what are multi-dwelling units, and how are they kind of significant in this process. We'll do a breakdown of the speed test tool how-to, and then we'll go through some outreach materials that will be available for everyone online in English and Spanish. And then finally, we'll do a short interactive activity and invite you to kind of share out how you'll empower members of your community to participate. We'll do a Q&A, and then we'll talk through next steps. So let's see who's in the room today. And I'm just gonna move my screen over here so I can see everyone. Hopefully that's still sharing out. So let's see who's in the room today. Let's use the raise hand function, or feel free to kind of say me in the chat, and I'm gonna read off different groups. And so raise your hand if you belong to that group, and we'll kind of see who is here. So, and you know what, maybe I'll stop screen sharing and just kind of verbalize this piece so we can all see each other. So raise your hand if you are here from a nonprofit organization. Okay, big nonprofit contingent. I see some familiar faces. That's wonderful. All right, you can lower your hands. Raise your hand if you're here from a community-based organization. Okay, we got I know nonprofit, community-based organization, there's some overlap. All right. Raise your hand if you're here from a local government department. All right, we got some local government here. Fantastic. Raise your hand if you're a community member here. Fantastic. And then let us know, raise your hand if you're part of a housing authority or a housing organization. Wonderful. And did we miss anyone? Is anyone here who's not a part of any of those groups? Feel free to write it in the chat and let us know so we can recognize you. Okay, I think we got everyone. All right, I'm gonna share my screen once again. And then feel free to also put in the chat who you are and why you're here. And can folks see my PowerPoint slide? I want to make sure I'm sharing the right document.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great. So yes, feel free to write in the chat who you are and why you're here. And I'll keep rolling. So I'm going to do another quick interactive activity here. If you have been in meetings, some of this may be review to you. And so I want to give folks a chance to kind of shout out or volunteer information if you have expertise or you're familiar with some of these terms, because these will all be really critical throughout the next month and really throughout the next year as the state and local governments start rolling out some of these federal programs. So let's test our knowledge. Can anyone tell me what the term unserved means? And you can unmute or put it in the chat. Any volunteers?
It's communities that have less than, I forgot the actual level of speed of internet service.
Yeah.
I want to
close.
say it's it.
So close, Tara. And I see Connie just dropped it in
There
the
it
chat.
is. There it is, 25. Yep.
Yeah. So unserved means that you don't have broadband according to the FCC definition of broadband, which is 25 over 3 megabits per second. Okay, we got a lot of folks who know this. That's awesome. How about underserved? Or if anyone wants to share the difference between underserved and served. I know there's a lot of nuance here.
I have my own special definition of underserved. Only one ISP serves your location, and it's usually unaffordable.
Thanks, Dr. Suarez. Does anyone know the technical definition of how underserved will be defined through the federal programs? All right, I'll share this one. So underserved, the technical definition is you might have that 25 over 3 service, but what you don't have is 100 over 20 megabits per second service. And then served, again, by the FCC's definition, which is kind of governing this phase in the process, means that you do have access to 100 over 20 megabits per second in broadband speed. All right, does anyone remember what latency means? This is a tough one.
Is that the upload, download speed or something like that?
Latency is here. I'll get the exact definition. The time it takes data to go to a server and back to your connection. So if you have high latency, it can cause your video meetings to be choppy or freeze. So we're looking for latency that is 100 milliseconds or lower. And does anyone want to share their understanding of a community anchor institution or a multi-dwelling unit?
They're institutions that typically provide the critical resources and services to support local residents.
Yeah, that's great. Schools, yeah, schools are a community anchor institution. That's great. And a multi-dwelling unit is a residential building that has 2 or more units. So you could call it an apartment building, but correct, Jessica, apartments, senior living facilities, really any building that has more than 1 unit in it. So you can take a glance here at the definitions. I would say, we'll share these slides, but save this, print it out. You'll be seeing these terms a lot. The federal government is, defining these rules and regulations based on pretty strict definitions. And so this will be important to remember as we go forward. All right, so I'm going to share a little bit of background on what the challenge process is before we dive into the training. So the challenge process is triggered by this program called BEAD, which is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. So $1.4 billion was awarded to Illinois to connect all unserved and underserved locations to broadband over the next 5 years. And these 4 boxes share a little bit more detail here. So the idea is universal broadband coverage across the state using fiber wherever possible, prioritizing access for unserved and underserved locations, but also as funding allows, helping community anchor institutions like schools, libraries, certain local service organizations get connection to gig service, which is over 1,000 megabits per second. And then MDUs as well, so those multi-dwelling units. The program requires some kind of low-cost broadband service option, as well as Illinois is looking at a middle-class affordability plan. And then there's a requirement to go through a sub-grantee selection process within 1 year. So we'll have 1 year to kind of put out a solicitation, and then an additional 4 years to actually implement that infrastructure. So if you've been at some webinars lately, a lot of this will look familiar. So I'm just going to kind of breeze through this as a reminder. What is the purpose of the challenge process? To ensure that the state's broadband map accurately reflects your home or your organization's access to broadband. Who can submit challenges? So this is really what we're going to dig in today. Only local units of government, nonprofit organizations, and internet service providers can formally submit challenges to get this map up to date. But individuals can participate through local governments or nonprofits, which is really going to be our focus today, hence that train the trainer approach. So what can be challenged? The state will be publishing a map in the next couple of weeks that will have both broadband serviceable locations, which are essentially households and businesses, as well as community anchor institutions, which I know a lot of folks here provided input on. And again, those are schools, parks, libraries, certain community service organizations, organizations that focus on reentry support, senior centers, hospitals, things like that. So anything that you see on a map, there will be a 2 to 3 week period where you can submit challenges if you feel that that item is not listed correctly. So if something you experience is different than what you're seeing on the map, there will be a process to submit a challenge to correct it. When will the challenge process be held? We're kind of tied to federal approval of our initial plans to kick off that process, but hoping within the next few weeks, by the end of January is when this process will kick off. And before that, that broadband map will be available for folks to just kind of peruse and get familiar with. So I think we're having a webinar next week to start walking through that. But the good news is that the speed tests that we are going to talk about today, you can start as early as now, as early as yesterday, because it just has to be completed within 60 days of that formal challenge process opening. So next, we're going to go through how individuals can participate. So how can individuals participate in the challenge process? This is what we're going to focus on for the bulk of today. So while only eligible entities can submit challenges directly, and this is, like I said, nonprofits, internet service providers, local governments, these organizations can submit challenges on behalf of individuals. So a local nonprofit here has helped to make this process much easier. The Internet Equity Initiative, based out of the University of Chicago, has developed an online tool that can be used by individuals to test their speed and latency. And then if those individuals would like, they can submit their information. And if they follow the rules that I'll walk through in a minute, all of that can be submitted as a challenge to contribute to that broadband map. So how does this work? First, the individual will need to complete a speed test 3 times over 3 separate days. And then should they want to submit their information, they'll include their name, address, and their current internet subscription. Then they'll submit. The Internet Equity Initiative will receive the data, and then we'll submit it to the Office of Broadband as a challenge. Something to note here is that your personal data is going nowhere except into the challenge process. So there will be no personally identifiable information published anywhere, simply just the speeds that you're experiencing may, if they're eligible, update our understanding of the map. And what I have here in the bottom is kind of why should you participate? Why should you encourage your community members to participate? And that's really because only you and only community members know the internet quality that you receive in your home. And your experience may be different than what is reflected on the map. So the more people who participate, the more we'll understand broadband needs and can ensure that funding goes where it is needed most, both now and into the future. So the sort of audience that we hope to target for today was trusted local organizations. So hopefully if you're here, you are a trusted local organization. That could mean a county government or a community-based organization or a local healthcare center, a senior center, housing authority. We are hoping that you have these trusted relationships with your community so you can spread this information far and wide. So after today's training, we hope you feel equipped to bring this information to members of your community and educate them on why the broadband map is important, and most importantly, support them through this speed test process should they want to participate. So you can get trained today so you can train others tomorrow. You can share the opportunity through social media. We have flyers and one-pagers that you can print out and distribute. Post them to bulletin boards, laundromats, any sort of community spaces, train members of your community on how to participate, and then support people who you might already have touch points with. Let's say that you've heard them talk about their internet and they may want to take a speed test. You'll sort of be prepared with that information to support them in that process. And I see some questions coming through the chat, so just acknowledging them, and we will make sure to get to them in the Q&A section. All right, so this next slide is about multi-dwelling units. If you recall, multi-dwelling units are apartment buildings. They have at least 2 units in the building. And the reason why it's important to call them out here is that there may be instances where a building is marked as fully connected to high-speed internet on the broadband map, when in reality, not all units are connected. But the maps have historically been a bit overstated, and we have heard anecdotally that perhaps residents in certain units may not be getting that broadband service that their neighbors are getting. And this is the kind of thing that we want to know on a map, so these areas can get funding to make sure that every unit is getting that service. So how can you correct the map? Residents of a multi-dwelling unit can take 3 speed tests over 3 days to document what they're experiencing and then potentially alter whether their building is eligible for funding to update broadband infrastructure. So there's a couple of thresholds based on how big the building is. In a building with 2 to 15 units, at least one unit must participate in that 3 speed tests over 3 separate days. In a 16 to 24 unit building, you got to have at least 2 units doing this. And then in a building with 25 or more units, at least 3 units must participate. And a question you may have is, how do I know if my participation will actually have an impact on the map? There's, first of all, no downside in participating because all of this data is going to a place where we can sort of like study it and better understand broadband quality and speeds and subscriptions around the state. But there is a chance that your broadband speed test does impact the map and thus impacts whether your building may be eligible for funding. So the entire building may be considered eligible for funding to improve broadband quality if the following 2 things are true. This is not the only scenario, but this is one that may be common. So you take those 3 speed tests over 3 days, and if the median result that you get is a slower internet than 100/20 megabits per second, so your speeds are below 100 or your speeds are below 20 upload speeds, or your latency is above 100 milliseconds, and we know that you subscribe to a plan of 100/20 megabits per second or higher. This is likely the scenario that may trigger your building being changed in terms of its eligibility on the map. So next I'm going to go into, I keep talking about a speed test. So what does this speed test look like? I'm going to go into kind of a step-by-step walkthrough. And if you give me 1 sec, my lighting is strange, so I'm just going to adjust that one moment. Okay, thank you for bearing with me on that one. So the very first step is to find the internet speeds that your household currently subscribes to. What you're looking for is a download speed and an upload speed labeled as megabits per second or Mbps. So like I said, an example is 100/20 Mbps. That means that your download speed is 100 and your upload speed is 20. Once you find this, just jot it down. You could take a screenshot, you could write it down. You're just going to want to feel comfortable with having that number. Where can you find your current subscription? There's a couple of ways. It may not be on your bill, but you can log onto your account online or visit your internet service provider's mobile app and look under your profile. And we did some tests of walking through this process, so I have that to share as time allows. You could also just call your internet service provider and ask what speeds that you subscribe to, but really make sure that you're getting the download speed and the upload speed. All right, so how do you actually take a speed test? Visit beadchallenge.org and you will see this speed test here. You can hover over the text to view everything in Spanish. To start the speed test, click Start, and this will prompt the speed test to begin. Note that it may take 30 seconds, a minute, probably not more than that. So just kind of take a step back and let it run as it should. A couple of best practices to make sure that your speed test is as accurate as possible is to get close to your router. And if you do have an Ethernet plug, you can actually plug that in from your computer or laptop into your router. So after your speed test runs, it'll be done like this, and you'll see your download speed, your upload speed, and your latency. These are kind of the 3 pieces that are most important to look at for these purposes. So what are we actually looking for here? Is your download speed less than 100? Is your upload speed less than 20? And is your latency greater than 100? If any of these 3 things are true, then that could be a good opportunity to submit your speed test results. So I'm just going to throw this prompt out there, but looking at these questions and looking at the speed test result on this screen. Is there any result of this speed test that might prompt you to submit as part of a challenge? And feel free to write it in the chat or shout it out.
I'll take a wild guess. Is it concerned about the upload speed?
Yes, Lavetta.
Ah,
Yeah, and see
good.
Jennifer and Effingham County. Great. Yeah. So our upload speed is only 15.5, which is lower than 20. So great. Great looking with a close eye, everyone. And just remember that these are the 3 questions to ask. And again, because you're taking the median over 3 days, there's no harm in submitting if you don't meet these criteria. But I think this is definitely an instance where you might not be getting that 100 over 20 speed. So just highlighting this, we're at 15.5. If your latency is over 100, if your download speed is less than 100, and if your upload speed is less than 20, you will get this prompt that says poor internet performance has been detected. To make sure that this measurement informs your community's eligibility for funding and is reflected on the broadband map, fill in your address, zip code, and email below and submit the results for analysis. So you'll be reminded, which is great. So if you want to submit your speed test results, you can click on this little down arrow on the actual website. It'll say click here for instructions and to submit your information. And then you'll see this opportunity to fill in your name, your email, and your address. And remember, I said write down your current speeds, write down your current subscription. This is where you want to put that in. So pretty straightforward here. Your address is going to be really important. And if you're in an apartment building with 2 units or more, just make sure that you indicate your unit number. So after you do this and you hit submit, you got to repeat it over 2 more days. This is really important because your challenge won't count unless you repeat it 3 times over 3 days. Luckily, once you submit your email, you will receive reminders from the Internet Equity Initiative to complete 2 more speed tests. They don't need to be a consecutive 3 days in a row, just a series of 3 days or more than 3 days if you'd like. So the whole purpose of this training is, well, many of you, I saw we had a ton of nonprofits here, some housing organizations, local governments. All of you can submit challenges on behalf of your organizations. But the real reason we're here today is to make sure that you're equipped to share this information with residents of your communities. Because, we're probably not reaching them. I think we had maybe 3 community members here, which is awesome. But it is really up to you to make sure that folks feel empowered to know what speeds they're getting and make sure that the map accurately reflects it. So next, I'm going to share a couple of materials which will be made available later today. So our team here at the state created these social media graphics that emphasize the basics of the message we're trying to convey. Calling all Illinois residents, let's get the broadband map right. How you can help takes 3 speed tests over 3 days. And then it kind of goes into those 3 main steps. 1, confirm your current subscription. 2, test your speed. 3, submit your information and repeat over 3 days. So just remember, 3 speed tests, 3 days. These are also available in Spanish and will be posted on the website as well. If folks are looking for something a little bit more detailed that you can print out, hang on your wall, share with residents, treat it as more like a detailed flyer, we have 2 one-pagers here. The first one on the left is geared towards individuals and kind of covers what we just talked through. So it talks about those 3 steps, but also just helps folks understand, what is a speed test? What is this tool? Why should I do this? You know, what are you doing with my data? What impact can I have? So hoping to just make sure that folks are up to speed on that information. And then the second one is specific to multi-dwelling units, MDUs, and shares out some of that specific information related to the number of units in a building that need to participate to kind of make a difference for that building. So if you want to write down this website, or perhaps someone could throw it in the chat, we have a new landing page for the challenge process called dceo.illinois.gov/BEAD challenge. There's a whole bunch of things on that webpage, but you'll be able to scroll down and see a link to each of those files. You can click it and it'll automatically download it. We'll also share this out over email. And then those graphics are, you know, made for social media, so you can share it on your platform of choice. All right, let's do an interactive activity, and then I do see that there are some questions. So hopefully we get some folks sharing out right now, and then we'll go into questions. So I would love to hear, how will you empower and support members of your community to participate? And if you could share, what spaces or interactions will you tap into to engage residents? Is that going to be, you know, maybe you sit one-on-one with someone to sign them up for SNAP benefits, and oh, by the way, you know, here's a flyer. I can help walk you through taking a speed test. Or maybe it's printing something out and putting it in a laundromat or in a common area or even in a computer lab. So if anyone wants to share, yeah, Candace, go ahead.
Great. So one of the things that we're going to do is in our MDU spaces where we have partnerships, particularly with our local housing authorities, we are going to be educating residents on why the challenge process is important and what it means to them. And then we'll be setting up some tabling. So while we're working with them on ACP and other digital skill building work, we'll talk to them about a speed test, and we'll be available to support them while we're on site. So we'll share with them the instructions. They can go up to their unit. They can ask us any questions, and then we'll help them make sure that they submit, if appropriate, their speed tests on the website.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Candace. A perfect example of kind of having both that information's available, but then that more like actively supportive, you know, we can come with you and help you do a speed test or answer your questions and support you. So thank you for sharing. Reverend, go ahead.
Happy New Year to everyone. Great information, Devin. It was just really great information. You know, we're a mega church with over 18,000 members, so it's going to be exciting to share this information with them, to let them know. I know I've talked to you, and I think it's Felix or one of those individuals to have some people come out and explain it some too. But this really helps us to individually attract people and inform them. So I know what to say to them now, and I know how to use this information. I have one quick question though about those speed tests. One thing that I've noticed when we do speed tests ourselves is that we should do it maybe different times a day, because when a lot of people are on it during the peak hours of the day is usually when it's slower than if they're testing it at night when they get home or something, and they got a better speed than they do. So maybe if we should tell them if they tested it different times a day as well.
That's great. Yeah, I think the more diversity, the better. And if anyone on the call has, you know, recommendations or experience on time of day, feel free to jump in. Alexis, go ahead.
Howdy. I would suggest indeed to speed test at those busy times when kids are home and trying to do their homework, and when folks are all trying to use the internet at the same time, because that's when we need it the most. That's when we need it to work the most.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it's important to understand how your internet's operating at that busiest time when the most folks are home and using it. But if you're curious, also do it at the quiet times, and it could be a good like educational opportunity to see how that might change. But that's great. All right, I'm going to read out a couple of great responses from the chat. Oh yeah, Lavetta, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm having trouble with my computer, so I couldn't find the raise hand. But I concur with Reverend Terry. I also, we're scheduled, well, a couple things, Devin, we want to talk to you offline about a couple of questions that we have that doesn't really concern the whole group. The other thing is we're scheduling, I think it's February 10th, a major health fair awareness day at our church, where it's going to be community organizations, other churches, our church, of course. And so we're thinking that that might be a wonderful opportunity for us to have a booth, so to speak, so that we can talk to the masses about it.
That's great. And yeah, feel free to email me and we can chat offline about any specific questions. In terms of the dates, so the tricky thing here is that there is going to be a formal challenge window. This will be 2 to 3 weeks. Depending on when that starts, you just want to make sure that you're not promoting it once the challenge window is over. So the options are you could do this now through the end of the challenge window. And I wish we could share a date, but there's a lot of dependencies that are kind of out of our hands. So that could be in mid-January, late January, and then that'll be a 2 to 3 week period. So potentially February 10th may still be in the challenge process, but let's just kind of touch base as that gets closer.
Great. Thank you for that's an excellent point. Thanks for that. I'll keep track.
Okay, I'm gonna read out some great things here in the chat. Tracy Smith from the Illinois Public Housing Association, I think, or Public Health Association, says that she'll share this with over 500. Can someone share what a CHW is?
Community health workers. So they're out in the community across the state, and especially rural areas.
Fantastic. So Tracy will share with over 500 community health workers to share out across the state. We have Katie from Literacy Works, who will share with their 60 adult literacy programs in our network throughout Illinois. And training volunteer tutors can do these tests with their adult learners because English learners and refugees tend to be left out of these conversations. And now they can participate. That is exactly the idea. Train the trainer. That's fantastic. Tara said she'll share this information out with the consortium partners and networks. Maria will share information with clients in the office. Lauren could see putting out information in the retail store and at events where PCs for People distributes low-income computers. I'm going to get to the questions all at the end, so I'm going to skip them for now. Great. Really, really awesome ideas. Okay. Next steps, and then we'll get to questions. So that was all around, focusing on individuals. If you are a nonprofit, a local government, or an internet service provider, you can also submit challenges yourself. We've had lots of separate webinars around the challenge process on how you can participate. So if this does not ring a bell, reach out to me and I'll make sure you get that information or at least point you to recordings. We're going to be doing webinars every week on this. So this was kind of a special, more community-oriented one, but there's going to be broader ones every week. So all of that being said, if you want to participate in the challenge process directly, meaning beyond taking the speed test, we'll need you to pre-register. So we can put the link in the chat, and pre-registration is very easy. There's really no harm in it. We just need to verify that you are an eligible entity and just get your information so you get that information on when the challenge process is opening up. Pre-registration doesn't mean you need to participate, but it does. But if you want to participate, you will need to have pre-registered. So if you pre-register, you'll get an account login, and then once the challenge process opens, you can use those credentials to log in. We had an original deadline of January 12th to pre-register, so let's go with that, but that deadline may be extended based on when we see the challenge process opening. Okay, outreach next steps. Share. So we'll have these social media graphics, one pagers, you can download them. Again, print them out, post them on social media. I think the like general awareness is great, but really those one-on-one trusted relationships that you can tap into will be most effective to get someone to go from just seeing that this process exists to actually taking the speed test on 3 separate days. Like I mentioned, you can start taking speed tests within 60 days of the challenge process opening, which is now. So that's great. Next week, there is a continuation of our weekly webinar challenge process series, where we get much more into the weeds on mapping, the challenge portal. So if none of that sounds familiar, check your email to make sure that you can register for those, just so you're kind of in the know. All right, and with that, let's move on to the Q&A. So I saw a couple of things in the chat that I can just run through. Or Nancy, I know sometimes you're collecting these as well, so feel free to support. All right. Thanks for your patience all. Just getting past our quiz answers. All right, so it looks like Shabika may have answered this one, but I'll just read this out loud. We got a question: as an ISP, an internet service provider, if we want to challenge a location, do we need to reach out to individuals to run a speed test at the location? So the answer to that is no. If you are an ISP, you are an eligible entity to submit challenges yourself. So definitely complete the pre-registration to get your credentials, to then log on to the challenge portal when the time comes. There will be lots of ways that you could submit challenges. You could select locations, indicate on what grounds you want to challenge them. You could do that using speed, and then you'll provide evidence of a speed test. And there's also a whole host of other ways that you could challenge. So I would say probably the best place for you to get your questions answered are those weekly BEAD challenge process webinars, and we have lots of previous ones that we can send you to make sure you're up to speed. The landing page, dceo.illinois.gov/BEAD challenge, will have the most relevant resources for you. Is it possible to add organization branding to the graphics? Yes. I guess we'll share them as images or PDFs, and then feel free to edit them yourself or just tag your logo on there and do a save as. If there's anything more, technical that we can do to make that easier, let me know, and we'll try and do that. Okay, we got a question. The challenge needs to occur over 3 days. Does that mean calendar days or minimum 24 hours apart? That's a great question. So one clarification is the 3 days do not need to be one after the other or consecutive. It can be a Monday, a Wednesday, Saturday. I'm going to look to my colleagues. I don't know if Shabika, if you know the answer to, is it calendar days or 24 hours apart? I would assume 24 hours apart, but someone can correct me if they know more.
Yeah, I don't think we have specifics in terms of the number of hours they have to be apart. So yeah, it's kind of open. And I think to the previous point, really looking at those times where you have an issue connecting, that could be the weekdays, could be the weekends. So like really also giving that a thought, what would be strategically the best times when you don't get those speeds to actually run the speed test so that those are the ones that are recorded. But we don't have any specific guidelines in terms of the hours.
I'm happy to chime in.
Oh
The
yeah, go ahead.
speed test taken by residents does not have to be 24 hours. It just has to be calendar days separate, and there's no time restrictions on when they can be taken. I think the comment earlier that it is busiest in the evening, say from 5 until 10 p.m. During the rebuttal phase, providers do need to make sure that they're giving evidence that is during that window. And that's a way that shows that providers have the network capacity to reach that 100 by 20 to rebut the speed challenges. But the actual challenge itself doesn't have to be during that specific window, nor 24 hours apart, just calendar days apart.
So you could do 11:58 p.m. on Sunday and 12:02 a.m. on Monday. Sounds like. Sounds good. Can one individual submit speed tests for multiple addresses? So to submit a speed test, I believe you need to be a subscriber to the internet in that respective household. So someone can't go around submitting speed tests for places where they do not live. So I would say the answer is probably no. You need to subscribe to the internet in that place. And again, Greg, Shubika, feel free to refine my responses if you think there's anything else that folks should know. Okay, Laura asked, is the challenge for Chicago only or Cook County residents? The challenge is statewide. Chicago, Cook County, all the counties, anyone is encouraged to participate and help us get this map as comprehensive as possible. All right. I have computer labs and some multi-dwelling units. Can I run speed tests in the computer labs? So Pat is from Chicago Housing Authority. I would say yes. I think that though your computer labs may be considered community anchor institutions. And so in that case, the standard is you should be able to enroll in 1 gigabit service, which is over 1,000 megabits per second. So that's kind of a different approach where it does not hurt to take a speed test, but for the challenge process, what you'll want to do is call up your local internet service providers, anyone who serves that computer lab, and ask if they can serve you with 1 gigabit speeds. And Greg here is from NTIA, our Illinois representative for the federal department who's kind of governing a lot of this. So Greg, I might ask if it's a computer lab in a housing authority apartment building, do you think that that's right, that would probably be considered a community anchor institution versus a residence?
Correct. That sounds right to me.
Okay. And if you are curious on how your household or how your institution is currently categorized, that's the first map that will be coming available, I think in the next 2 weeks. It's going to be called the BEAD Challenge Map. And in that map, what you can do is search for your address and kind of zoom in and click on where you live, where someone lives, or where your institution is, and you'll be able to see what speeds we have documented as available and whether or not that location is eligible for funding. So that's kind of how you'll know whether or not to submit a challenge or to take a speed test. But again, it's not necessary. Taking the speed test is just kind of a good way to learn about your service. Any other questions? Any other comments? All right, well, I'm gonna just throw the link in the chat to the speed test tool if you wanna test it on your own. Again, you can take speed tests without actually submitting information, so you can just get a sense for how it works and anticipate any questions you might get from community members. And we'll be sure to get you the outreach materials and one-pagers in English and Spanish by either like later today or tomorrow. All right. Well,
Devin,
oh,
can
of
I
course.
just wanted, I always have something to say, Devin. I just wanted to thank you for your leadership and thank you for making the transition easy for all of us, even though you have different responsibilities. You're making sure that we don't miss a beat. So I am grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lavetta. Well, thank you for coming along for the ride and being involved in statewide initiatives too. It's super important. So I appreciate that. Pat, go ahead. Pat, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I'm here. So I got a question, just like with ACP, we have a trust factor with some of our residents when we're asking to provide this device or whatever in their home. Does anyone have any suggestions on how we can work with those families to build that trust? Because, some people might think, oh, they're installing something in my home and they're going to be tracking my activity, just that whole trust factor with actually asking them that we want to check your speed and we need to do this over a 3-day period.
So one great question, very, very relevant. One clarification is that the device, the opportunity to install a device in your home is an awesome way to get even more in-depth information about your speed and internet quality overall. It is actually not required for this though. So the only thing that's required to participate is visiting beadchallenge.org, hitting start, and then filling in your information and hitting submit 3 times over 3 different calendar days. So if that's a little easier, someone could just do it on their own in their own home. Does that make sense? Okay, we got the thumbs up. Dr. Suarez?
Early on, I posted a link in the chat to an article about Comcast and AT&T challenging millions of dollars being in California being given to Oakland. And I'm curious, has there been any fear of that happening in Illinois? And if so, are people trying to prepare for that possibility?
That might not be related to the BEAD challenge process.
Well, not maybe not this process, but it's BEAD money that they're challenging.
I will need to read more up on that, Ron, but maybe let's connect offline and we can chat more once I have the background. Thanks for sharing. Okay, we're getting a couple of late in the game questions, so I'm going to cover these. Will the system know when you have submitted 3 times, or do you need to keep track of that yourself? Not sure if Nzinga is still on and can answer that question. Nzinga is from the Internet Equity Initiative. I know that you will get email reminders, so it's a good question of will they stop after 3 times? So I might need to follow up with you offline on that. But Nzinga, feel free to jump in if you do have that answer. Okay. How can someone challenge non-existent infrastructure? Oh, sorry, Nzinga, we could not hear you. Make sure you're on the English channel if you click on the interpretation globe at the bottom of your Zoom. Or feel free to type in the chat. Okay. Okay, confirming that After you take a speed test 3 times, you will not get any more emails, so you don't need to keep track yourself, but you're welcome to. All right, I'm going to go to this last question. How can someone challenge non-existent infrastructure without the speed test? This sounds like it would be an availability challenge, which means you live in an area where you don't have any broadband service. So if this is the case, then your location will be marked as unserved on the map, and then you would be eligible for that. Your area would be eligible for that infrastructure funding. If you live in an area that you don't have any broadband at all, any internet at all, but you are marked on the map as having service, then this is a place where I would go through one of the eligible entities, a nonprofit, a internet service provider, or a local government entity. I would approach someone that you trust, or maybe you are one of them, and educate them on the challenge process and share the situation. And then basically what you'll need is just evidence that internet is not available. This could be an email from your correspondence with a local provider saying, sorry, we cannot serve your area. Or you could have screenshots of looking on different provider websites and saying that they don't serve your address. So again, I'm not sure, John, if you were here as an individual or as a part of a nonprofit or local government, but that will kind of impact the path that you take. Any final questions? Okay, great. Well, this is fantastic. As a reminder, there is a second session tomorrow at 2 p.m. It will be the same as today, so no need to come again. But if you want to come again or forward to a friend, feel free to do so. But again, it's the same content as today. So if you were here, feel free to just decline that unless you want to come and hear this again, and then you'll be an expert. All right, well, thank you, everyone, and excited to work together to get this broadband map right. So enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
All right.
I'll put my email in the chat if anyone has any one-on-one questions.
Thank you, Devin, and we'll see you tomorrow at noon.
Thank you. Sorry, tomorrow at noon.